Welcome to my live stream. We're going to do a segment, Two and a Half Geeks, with Mike Soul and Doug Fink. My name's Doug Fink. I'm your host, and I'll also be chatting about AI with Mike. For folks who don't know me, I'm a 15-time Microsoft MVP, wrote a book about PowerShell, and I'm deep into the PowerShell space. I have a PowerShell module that integrates ChatGPT at your console, and in your scripts, you can do an install-module, PSAI. I'll put that in the description below if you want to grab it and try things out. And before we kick off with Mike, got a couple of things to show, upcoming events, and I want to do a little bit of a demo. And as I do the demo, Mike, if you want to chat about it and comment if you want or not, and then we'll get into a deeper talk on where AI is and what we both see and what we're doing. So for folks, tomorrow, I'm going to be doing a coding rock solid AI agents. I'm going to demo an agent piece in a minute. It's all about PowerShell precision. So if you want to join tomorrow, that is a paid event. That's a paid live stream. If you do join, you don't have to, or if you do RSVP, you don't have to be there. I will send an email out, the actual recording. I will email out the code. You'll get a behind the scenes or an early view of what this new module does. I'm still figuring out if and when I will actually put it out and publish it publicly. Yeah, these live streams I have a lot of fun, and folks that join seem to as well. Next month, September, and I see Axel's in the house. Axel Anderson, we're going to do another 2.5 Geeks. Axel is actually building a bunch of stuff, and he and I have had some great conversations offline. And he's building out some really cool pieces around the concepts of the PSAI module. And yeah, it's great conversations of what, where, how, and why. And he brings some really cool ideas to the table. So it'll be great to chat with him next month as well. And cool. I will also post, if you want to get the recording from today, I will post my YouTube video channel here in the chat. Let's see if I can get it. There we go. Hey, Axel. Cool. And so if you want to go over there, you can subscribe, get the notifications. You'll know when I post this video from today. And also I publish or post videos on all different kinds of YouTube stuff. I showed how you can work with things like PowerShell and the clipboard and AI in the console. I won't demo that now, but I have a 5-minute video on that. Take a look at it. Also a whole bunch of other videos about how you can take data and create interactive HTML. So it's got a lot of cool stuff on that channel, I believe. And again, get on there. If you like stuff, hit the thumbs up on those videos. It's great for the algorithm. And again, subscribe and get notifications. And I've been doing this for a few years, and all these kind of live streams like I'm doing today, I put out except for my premium content. All right. So can you see my screen? Give me a thumbs up or awesome. Hey, good. All right. So I'm not sure if Mike, you've seen this yet, but let's talk about agents. All right. So everybody's talking about agent workflows, agentic workflows. I don't know what the term should be. Some people don't like calling them agents. They prefer to call them assistants because agents make them think of FBI. I understand that. I chose the word agent, but if you want, you can alias what you see to the word assistant, and if that makes you feel more comfortable. At the heart of it is really what this thing is doing. So this I'm about to demo. Well, I apologize for the noises. I live in Manhattan, so you might hear horns every once in a while. Like, I don't know if you hear that, but yeah, good. Gives a little bit of...
Too loud. You're good.
Excellent. Little authentic Manhattan stuff. So, so this, what I'm going to show today, right now, spent a few minutes on it, this is part of a new module I'm building. Folks who have been on the premium live streams have seen this. And this is what I'm going to go deep into tomorrow and do a deep dive on all this good stuff. It's a separate module, but it's all built on top of the PSAI stuff. It's not something I invented off the top of my head. I've been reviewing a lot of the work, different SDKs out there. I've been looking at things like LangChain, early on Baby GPT, AutoGPT, Crew AI, AutoGen from Microsoft. What's the other one that's in C#? I always get that. Semantic kernel. I've looked at a bunch of those things and I've cherry picked and said, oh, I think I see where they're going. I would prefer to go to this way. And I can do it with, I think, with a lot less ceremony. So what does that mean? So if I do something like new agent, then you can pipe that into another function called get agent response, right? That's all you need. Now you can wrap this in a function, further abstract it, whatever you want, and I can give it a prompt. And the prompt, if you can get this right, and the prompt I'm going to say is, what is today? And let's see what it does. So now this is actually using PSAI. It took all that good stuff, it passed it back to the AI model on the server, and then I took the result and then I printed it out. So it's doing all that mechanical, all those mechanisms to get your prompt up there. And that's pretty straightforward. But we can see it says today's date is October 5th, 2023. Why is that? Because the model was trained, the latest 4.0 mini, which is what I'm using here, is trained as of October 5th, 2023. So that's when people get upset with this, start getting upset saying, well, you know, this thing is not, can't even get the date right. How good is it? Let's try something else, and then we'll see what we can do with it. See if we can get the typing down. Job, there we go. Job numbers for 2024. So if I type this in, let's see what the model tells me, if anything. And typically on Thursdays and Fridays, they're working on the back-end servers. And it says, okay, it looks like you might be looking for employment trends for 2024, although I don't have access to real-time data. So that's the key thing, right? It doesn't have access to real-time data. Okay, well, maybe we can solve that problem because ChatGPT Web solves it. So that's why I started building these agents. So I have something, so this new agent, we can do a couple things. One is, let's start with this. So I can say, I have something called a tool called Tabbly AI tool, right? And before we pipe it, let's get rid of that. So I'll just set that up. And we're going to store that in agent in a variable, right? So this is all good PowerShell right now. And what I can do is I know that the new Tabbly AI tool, it's a REST endpoint. It's a service that you can actually sign up, get a key. It's free. You get 1,000 queries a month. And it's like Google search or DuckDuckGo, but it's really tuned to be an AI type piece of responses so that it's tuned for AI to use and consume. So if I do a get command, this is the actual, what the code looks like, right? Now, if hopefully we're all PowerShell folks on here, I believe. So all I'm doing is I have a function called invoke web search, right? And I'm setting up one parameter query, make it mandatory, type it. I'm checking to see if you have a key set. If not, you can go here and grab one, and then you can set it in your environment, and then it works. There's a base URL that you go against, and then there's a bunch of parameters you can pass into the tool. You pass in the key, you pass in the query. I want a basic search, and I want a max results of 5, and you can turn other things on and off, true, false, for other pieces. And then down here, the standard invoke REST method against the URI, I'm going to post to it, and I'm going to pass in those parameters, and we're good to go. Now, if I use that straight away, invoke web, so this is using right as a regular PowerShell function that I might write and put in my environment, and this is what Tabbly returns. And I think we have a bit of a troll, so maybe not. We'll check that in a second. So this is what it returns, right? Standard stuff, has a title, the URL where it got it, and a bunch of content. So let's turn this into an agent as we started to do, right? So this is what comes back. So as we saw, I set up $agent. I'm going to create a new agent, and this new Tabbly AI tool, what that does is it uses something under the covers called register-tool, something else I built, which actually takes the signature of the function and translates that or transpiles it into the JSON format for function calling with OpenAI. I'm not going to talk about that, but if you want to join tomorrow, we're going to go deep. So that's what new Tabbly does. It knows where this function is. It does the translation, and it translates it so that the agent will now know about this tool. And the -show call tool calls is cool because it's almost a bit of a debugging, right? So now that I have that agent set up, okay, let's see if we can ask some questions like the same question we asked before, and we did not get, we got that couldn't hook up to any real-time data. Now notice this is what came back. So the agent, now I'm going to get a little anthropomorphic. The agent made a decision, said, hey, I have this tool called a search, and it knew how to take my prompt and it expanded it into, it created a prompt from that. So it figured that out. And then it used that tool and it knew how to call it because it took a query, right? And that's what this is setting up. And then I got back some results. How crazy is that? So let's take another step. Let's play with it a bit. So now I have an agent. Let's do it again. And I'm going to just change my prompt. And let's say, I'm going to say US job numbers for the last 3 Decembers. But before I do it, I'm going to bounce back up to where I created the agent. And there's something on here called instructions, right? Now you can think about that as a prompt. You can think of it as a system prompt. You can think about you're steering the actual model in a better way. And the cool thing is you can take all this, swirl it away, and your users never have to see it again. You don't either. It basically sets up the model with tools and a persona or a personality so it can do certain things. And once you do that, you can then reuse it over and over again. So the instructions I'm going to do, since we saw when I asked what is today, and it came back with a 2023 date, I'm going to say this is standard PowerShell. So I'm going to use string interpolation and say today is $get date. Okay. So now I've set the agent up again. So when I come up and say, get me for the last 3 Decembers, it knows, check it out. It's going, well, 3 years minus 2024. Now, how does it know to call it 3 times? How does it know that those are the queries that send to the search? I have no idea. Tomorrow we'll do a deep dive on that. And sure enough, we get back all that good stuff. Let's play with it a few more pieces, more for, if you install Glow on your system, if you noticed that output was actually Markdown. So if you have Glow on your system, you can now take all that. Wow, we got a lot of noise today. And there's what Glow does. So it takes that Markdown, and I have clickable, because I'm in a terminal, I now have clickable endpoints or URLs that I can do things. We'll take it one step further. If you have Visual Studio Code, you can actually pipe standard in to code. And I think it should load up. There it goes. And as it cooks, now I have just put that into Visual Studio Code, and I can preview it, right? So now I've got a nice little way. So this is how I start to use it, right? Now I can sit here and ask any kind of questions that I want to, and I'm having an agent that is a PhD intern figure out what I'm asking, and then begins to form its own questions based on the tools I provided. Tomorrow we'll go around more tools than just web search. One last thing. Let's see if I can do, what if I wanted to compare Ansible, Terraform, and Azure, ARM? I don't know why I would do that, but let's try it anyway. Get rid of this, right?
Note there too, Doug, I think an interesting pattern with these agent concepts, we've seen a lot of desire for very specific AI copilots, whatever we call them, that have a lot of meta prompts or system prompts that contextualize them, and then building pipelines of AIs together. And this, having it make those decisions, is super valuable because, like we saw with microservices, you just get into this giant web versus, hey, I've got one thing that knows the web.
1,000% correct. Exactly. And agents become like the granular way, and then you can, and I'm only showing you how to put a web search in. You can combine tools, which I'll go deeper tomorrow, right? You can start building your own tools, and it's just standard PowerShell, right? You may have a bunch of functions that are sitting around that you've been using for 100 years. It's well tested, really. Well, what happens if you start combining them and then put natural language on top of it and let the agent decide which to call, when to call, take the results. Now, I just asked it about Ansible, Terraform, and whatnot, and check it out. I even get a nice comparison table. How long would that take me to do? Now, a lot of people at this point would say things like, whoa, it hallucinates. And if there are people on the channel right now that feel that way, well, you can feel free to drop. It could hallucinate, which may be good, bad, and indifferent. I myself and Mike are experienced enough to go, yeah, I'm not going to take this, you know, hook, line, and sinker. I'm going to review the information before I start taking the next step. But look how much it ramps me up in lots of different ways. And I'm not limited to just asking about Terraform and Ansible and whatnot. I can be asking questions about jobs, about whatever. Remember, it's a PhD intern that's read everything on the planet. So if you want, I don't think I have it up. Do I have it up still? If you want, go back to the meetup page. Yes, I do. And you can RSVP, and we'd love to see you. We're going to go really deep on that. I'm going to show you how it works under the covers, how function calling works, and actually only OpenAI and Anthropic support function calling, which is what this it uses to get this kind of capability. And that's the end of my demo. So, Mike, how are you?
Doing well. It's interesting to see you apply this too, because I think I had asked you a question 2-3 months ago, and you're like, "Have you seen OpenAI functions?" And I'm like, "No." And now, like, seeing it in action as a module, like, yeah, you're moving really fast, Doug. So kudos.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That I don't think I'm moving fast. I'm just making sure that I'm spending my time on what OpenAI and these folks are doing, because it's, there's actually one person on the X platform. They do a weekly live stream, or they do a weekly X call, spaces, as they say. They do that, and they cover all the new research papers that came out like in a week or a month. Like, I don't know if you're on arXiv. I'm sure you've seen the arXiv stuff. The papers that come, not only are they just tremendous, I can't even understand what they're talking about. So it's just,
I remember back when I was still in college, like I'd go through like the RNN and the CNN, like the model discussions on arXiv at the time. And at that point, like I could read 1 or 2 a week and keep up with it. And now it's just like, I don't even try anymore. I have to get a summary report from people.
and I look for the aggregators, and the aggregators are losing it.
Yep.
What's really interesting too is that OpenAI, like typically within the last few months, like in May, we had the Google conference. OpenAI announced like 2 days later. We had the Build conference. Then Apple came out and talked about how they were working with OpenAI to update Siri, which they haven't done. But that period of time was just, again, a major explosion of stuff. And they updated their AI. They updated their REST APIs. They added new capabilities. They added structured outputs recently. But they're slowing down. And all the pundits and the YouTubers that like to be the influencers, it's hilarious. Like, they're complaining now. They haven't had an update in like 4 weeks. It's like, let's take a breather. Let's catch up. You haven't really even described what's really going on. So you talked about neural nets and whatnot, and RNNs and CNNs, full
That
disclosure.
was back when I
Yeah.
thought I could make it practical, and then the real world hit me, and everyone else made it practical, and I'm now a user of it, right?
Hey, so sometimes it pays to be a laggard,
Yep.
but if you're going to stay a laggard now and not learn how AI works, it's not going to work anymore. And you're not going to magically in 12 months get a product that go, oh, click, click, install next, next, install. It's not going to be that way with this stuff.
Yeah, and that's one of the things too that I've talked with a lot of clients about, and even my own team, is to your point about hallucinations. It's fine if it hallucinates. Like, don't trust it out of the gate. Understand how to tune your query. Understand how, like, you're having a conversation, and the more context you can give that model, the more likely you're going to get better answers. You can tell it is wrong, and it will correct itself or come back with more context to help move the conversation forward positively.
Excellent point. And it does it politely.
Yeah.
And the hallucinations, I see, it's been said, and I agree, hallucinations isn't a bug, it's a feature. And, I have ChatGPT, I pay for it. I paid it $20 a month. And on my phone, it has the voice capability. So I can sit there and I can talk to it, and the text to The text to speech is incredible. It can capture what I'm saying, even when I garble, because I'll wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, I better capture what I was dreaming about. It might be and I'll start talking, and it responds back. And um, that hallucination capability is a major brainstorming possibility, in my opinion. So, all the negative naysayers want to sit back and go, "Oh, it hallucinates. It's dangerous. Don't give it to anybody." And yeah, if you gave this to somebody brand new who's a junior coder, yeah, they're going to come back with crap. But they're going to do that anyway. That's why we're the senior people, and we have to always look over their shoulder. There's nothing different here. So adjust your point of view.
I lied to you. I am going to share my screen quick because it's a good example. So I had given just the free GPT a prompt, and I'm like, "Who's Doug Fink?" And like, you're a technical marketing writer. I always love to contextualize, like, what is your role in the request I'm making of you?
Awesome.
And
For the persona.
like it came back with things, and I'm like, yeah, that's not Doug. That's not Doug. But at the end of the day, if I'm a technical marketing writer, I should have somebody proofreading this. I should have
Awesome.
somebody more knowledgeable give me feedback. And like the concepts that it laid out are still valuable, and that's where, like, this is a good example of, yeah, the first time isn't going to be perfect unless you've pre-tuned the model or pre-tuned your queries so much, like, and that's oftentimes getting over that hurdle of, you have to build this. It's not out of the box going to be perfect for your use case.
Great point. It's not a silver bullet. It's not television. It's not sci-fi. It's not going to read your mind. But I do like the fact that it thinks I'm involved with PowerShell Universal. Is that Adam Driscoll's product?
It
I
is,
want to.
yeah. And when I
I'll
corrected
take
it,
credit
it
for
got it
that.
spot on, right? Like, so like I
Oh,
told
there you
it, hey,
go.
you're wrong. Like, can you confirm that? And it's like, oh no, you're right. That was Adam Driscoll.
That's hilarious. I love it. Well, you
Yeah.
know
So
what? Thank you, GPT. I appreciate the. But that's and to your point, like it does it does the scaffolding for you. It does the heavy lifting. And it is a conversation. People think it's like a search engine. You go up, type in your search, you kind of understand Google foo. You got your keywords. You browse through a bunch of links. You click. You refine your search. But you think that once you get to that link, I'm going on the path that I need to go. And AI and conversation is a whole new ball game. It's a whole new uh, set of capabilities that you have to work with. And if you're not trying it out, you're really not internalizing how it works. You're not getting a sense of like, oh, I can try this. And it's different. Like if you use ChatGPT compared to Anthropic, it's different than using a GitHub Copilot. They all have special sauce that make things happen differently. Um, and then I get to sit back and say, well, I gave it to you all at your fingertips in your console and your scripts. Now you can enable your scripts to have natural language capabilities. And just to throw on top of that, I think it was Microsoft earlier this year or last, they said in the next 3 years, which I think is too long, people will start using your scripts and your applications, and they're going to expect it to be a chat GPT interface. They're not going to want to sit and click on a bunch. They're going to want to talk. They're going to write stuff or talk to it, and it understands and then talks back. So, well, I don't really understand what you mean. What do you mean? This? Yes. Give me option number 2. Give me option number 5. Or what you did. I don't think you're right. And then your software needs to respond to that. So
RTFM's only been an issue for what, 30 years?
how long?
Longer than that. Yeah.
I don't even remember when I first heard that term. I remember earlier. Didn't Don Jones and Jeff Hicks write a book, RTFM, about PowerShell?
I think so. I mean, but to your point, like, no one, I have yet to interact with somebody who said, I love to read man pages or help docs, right? Like, it to your point, like, having a conversation is much more approachable than, oh, what's this parameter mean in this one function that may define it differently than I ever have because the module was written by somebody who's not an English first speaker. Like,
Absolutely.
there's so many different use cases where it just comes into play that it makes things more accessible.
Great point. So I guess I was playing around with Copilot. I was an early adopter because I love being an early adopter. That's why I early adopted Monad, which became PowerShell. But in 2021, I think they came out with first versions of Copilot for GitHub. the GitHub Copilot stuff. And I was playing with it and I was like, I don't know, what the hell is this thing doing? Right. It really wasn't. And then all of a sudden, within 6 or 7 months, it was constantly updating. And I was like, maybe I should get rid of this thing. And all of a sudden, I'm in a file and I'm typing stuff. And the ghost text comes up with a suggestion. I'm like, how the hell did it know to do that? And then I was like, this thing is alive. Like, what? How do I start to turn the knobs and dials? And then I started asking people in Microsoft about it, and they're like, we don't know. And then the term prompt engineering came out. And then when the thing on the web, ChatGPT web came out, and you could really interact with this thing, I started asking about my Excel module, my import Excel module. And I was like, so, and when I first say, well, how would I convert a CSV file into Excel? And it came using PowerShell, and it came back and it gave me the old way, using the COM interface, the COM model, where you'd spin up Excel and you'd poke data in. And I go, this thing sucks. And then I would type in, no, don't do that. And then but then I tried it. That became my evaluation criteria. So then a month went by and I do it again. All of a sudden, it started recognizing that there was a module out there called Import Excel. And then what was really weird is I'd ask questions. It would actually hallucinate function names that I didn't write. And what was even cooler, I was like, wow, that's a better name than I came up with. I'm like, this hallucination thing is really cool. Like, I could start using this to brainstorm how to build new modules. And I did. So yeah, reading manuals, crazy.
Yeah, I think too, the amount of times that rubber ducky debugging or troubleshooting has saved me from looking like a fool. And this is just another level of that, right? Like you don't have to assume that you're talking to someone smarter than you or more knowledgeable than you. Just have the conversation and see if it gets you further along in your thought process.
That's perfect. And you know, I've been shit on for this before, but I don't mind, because when I get shit on, I'm like, I must be right. Going on Stack Overflow or going on Reddit or going into a Discord channel and asking questions. How many times do you do that? And people come back and go, what the hell are you doing? That's a ridiculous idea. Why? Don't waste your time, or you don't know what you're doing. Get off the channel. We're banning you. I can't tell you how many times I go up to ChatGPT and it goes, well, that's a really good idea. Let's explore that. I find that a really nice way to engage with these. And I try to take that to people and, humans that I interact with and do the same thing. I have done that for decades. Early in my career, the only way I would solve a problem with another person was mock them till they did it my way. But this is it's a much easier, nicer way to get responses and interact and try to figure out things. And it's like, I'm going to come back and ask you even crazier stuff. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah, I feel it helps a lot with the creativity side too. Like, to your point, like, people are all different. We all communicate in different ways. And that's something I've even noticed is a GPT is sort of a generic example of someone you'd want to have that first interaction with. So ask the questions that you think would prompt a average user, an average consumer of the information you're trying to present to the GPT, because that's your first can it hold water test, right? That's the first, hey, am I even on the right path?
Great point. Fantastic point. Absolutely. And I look at that as kind of like steering the model or grounding the model. I often do things like there might be a new book that came out that I'm looking at, and I'll get into GPT and I'll say, have you read this book? Or sometimes I'll say, hey, do you know this person? And I'll give the author name, and he'll say, I'm an LLM. I don't know people. I'm like, oh, come on, don't be ridiculous. And then I'll say, okay, have you heard of this person? Have you heard of the book? And then what's cool is they have heard it. It was in the training data. Or even better, I was going to say in your example, you could say something like, read defink /space PSAI and tell me about it on GitHub. It'll know how to go construct that, find the GitHub page, and read the README. And you can then interact with that GitHub inside your session. So I do that with books. And then depending on the book, if I'm doing code or some other type of technical write-up or whatnot, I'll say, have you read that book? Read it now. And here's what I'm thinking about. Can you polish this in the style of that author? And oh my goodness, that just blows my, and it comes back and I'm like, I couldn't write that. and I could read that person's book, and I have, and I could pick things out and maybe polish up my stuff. But this does it like in sub-second response time and puts out a bunch of stuff. And the cool part is I'll put it out, and you can't tell that it's help the GPT enabled, so to speak. And I don't care. And guess what? I can look at the code, like what you were looking at. You picked out PowerShell Universal. Like, hey, wait a minute, that's not right. Now, if you give this tool to somebody who's not experienced, sorry, but they're going to take a look and they're going to probably come back to you and go, here's my information. And you'll sit there and go, nope, that's wrong, 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 wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So this really helps a person who's experienced in that domain, which is
Yeah, that's something we've been seeing deploying at scale, like in an enterprise use case too. There's new IT services you have to provide to the organization to get the value out of it. Things like actually having a human validate prompts. So like we had an example where a construction client utilized their material safety data sheets, all of their chemical handling processes, chemical spill handling processes, and having site supervisors use a GPT to interact with that data because those can be massive manuals. And the conversation becomes, okay, it has the right data source and we've limited to that. It could still give you the wrong process to follow, though. So, do we have a site manager or the manager of the site supervisors review that data and approve, like, hey, this is a good prompt, this is a bad prompt? How can we get that feedback loop all the way through so it isn't just one person doing one iteration? It's a system that is improving in each iteration.
that is. So have you implemented that, or is that still on the drawing board?
That is implemented, and that client ended up wanting to. They have a lot of aspirations that it's all powered by OpenAI, and a lot of what we find is to get the data context right, even if it's unstructured data. That's usually one of the gaps is, do we know the right data? Is it classified in any way? Is it even usable in a good way? And AI lowers that barrier of entry of, hey, this needed to be perfect, to this just needs to be relatively decent to be usable.
Oh, interesting. So you can take substandard data, unstructured data, and actually this will beef it up, so to speak, and make it more presentable or even more usable. Wow.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's even one thing. So earlier this year, NIST did their request for comments on their data classification special publication. So we're waiting to see where that spills out. But I think, and we've seen this conversation come up, especially enabling like M365 Copilot for end users and employees working with corporate data, is, can I classify data in a way that a GPT can also understand? If I write my data classification policy in a way that's, this is the type of data I'm classifying and why I'm classifying it, and then I give that context to the GPT, now
Mm.
I've just double dipped. And not only am I protecting myself, but I'm also enabling more value from that GPT.
Wow. So now I'll add to that. Not only is there function calling in GPT, right, in the open AI space, but they now done the structured output stuff, which means that you can construct JSON, and there's lots of ways you can extract that from your PowerShell or whatever else you're using to come up with JSON structures that says, hey, I want the output to be like this so I can evaluate it directly and be 100% sure. And it has new things like strict mode. I have a couple of those pieces enabled in the PowerShell, in my PowerShell module, and you can get really complex structures. You can even have nested structures, right? This is a purchase order. Here's the person's customer data. Here's the orders. Here's the order information, and you can go up to 5 deep. But by providing these JSON schemas, you can now structure the unstructured data or how it's going to report back to you to do exactly what you're talking about. And that all comes from the community back to the folks at OpenAI, and they're just listening up and down. So if you need a consultant on that, you let me know.
Definitely.
You got to take
It
those
is fun though.
opportunities.
Yeah, it's amazing. Just we have years of electronic data, and I think even like of healthcare, right? Like electronic medical records has been a transition going on 10 years now, a little bit longer. And all of that data is there. It's semi-classified with like ICD-10 codes. But what does that actually mean for the business? I don't know. We can use AI to find something.
I'm talking to a bunch of people because I brought up before we got on, and I was talking about VMware and Broadcom, and I know some folks in that space, and they were telling me that one of the folks, they support all hospitals up in the Northeast, and doctors go into operating rooms. They are dependent on VMs to be up, running, solid, fail-safe capable, because doctors are using that kind of stuff. And now they're beginning to explore AI in that space even deeper. And I'm like, oh, well, you can call me. We can work out some pieces on both sides, whether it's handling the VM side or even making agents to do all kinds of stuff. Yeah, and it's just incredible what you can begin to start thinking about past the hallucinations, past that, oh, this is just for code, generation, which it's tremendous at. But to bring it back to lawyers, for example, I recently read, and I think I posted it, and of course I took a beating on it, which because I thought it was fairly provocative. But lawyers have been asked, they were given GPT, right? And I think it was by OpenAI, I'm not sure. And they were like, go in and do what you would normally do with an intern, one of the paralegals that you would have. And after a couple of months, they were like, we don't need paralegals. They don't know what they're doing. This knows what it's doing. And because they're seniors, they can actually have, they can use 100 different little agents, so to speak, that can go out and do a bunch of, and then they take it and then they further review it. And maybe they'll have a paralegal that they say, go make sure all these court cases, these decisions we have here are actually real. So that's the extra. But now you're not hiring a bunch of paralegals. So people dumped on me like, oh, how are you going to get new partners? How are you going to get senior lawyers? Like, maybe you don't. I don't know. The same thing with us as
Have
software
them read and
developers.
understand the prompts that the seniors are using. What is the senior lawyer asking? Why are they asking it? Yeah,
How
it
can I
actually
improve it?
it is an interesting, so like we're building a whole new data set of, we're actually codifying how people think and process. And if
Wow.
a business captures that, like the way that a person interacts with a GPT helps us understand how they actually do their job and how they apply their knowledge in a way that a lot of people fail to articulate clearly.
And I would only tweak the word fail. We don't know how to articulate it. And especially as in business or even as software developers, we're used to saying $A equals one, print $A. What do you mean I'm going to ask a computer to do that? We've been so conditioned over so many, many, many years in university and who teaches us and how we learn from people that we don't think about having a conversation with this thing to help and then how do you direct and steer it? But yeah, the learning, how to sit on top of, you know, I didn't show it in the new agent thing I showed, but imagine you take that new agent stuff, right? And now I can do a start job on it. You know what a start job is, right? You run things in the background, right? So what if I had a file of a bunch of prompts that I wanted to do queries across the internet, and now I can just read that file and then spawn 100 jobs and then just harvest all the results into a bunch of markdown files. How much time is that going to save? So now I've got all these little assistants running around doing stuff for me. And then I might actually, once I harvest everything, I might give that and ask it to roll it up on that as well. So, and this is all happening with standard code. Now, can you do this with other languages? Absolutely. OpenAI meets every language. I like using PowerShell because there's less ceremony and more essence. But that's up to you what you want to do. But this now opens up, in my mind, it helps me open up my imagination, my creativity of how am I going to apply this. And as I always say, AI won't replace you. Somebody knows how to use AI will. And it's going to be up to the lawyers. It's going to be up to every industry. Hey, you know what? This is the new thing to learn. Some people are saying, well, does that mean you don't have to do computer science degrees? And to a certain degree, it has to change. But at the same time, understanding software development or how to automate things and whatnot, AI will amplify what you do. So, So how are you dealing with the customers? Are you seeing more people getting interested in it, or do you approach people, or do they approach you? If you approach them,
Both.
they're like, ah, get away from me.
Yeah, both. I think the amount of organizations that feel like they are required to live with Microsoft, what
Mm,
depending on their level of appreciation of that relationship. There are a large number of organizations in this world that have Microsoft and have transitioned to the Microsoft 365 ecosystem. And I think placing Copilot into that conversation really drove a whole new level of how do we work with data in our organization, because organizations are going through the same identity crises as individuals. If I am the small business that only ever worked by telephone and paper invoice, and I never updated to use QuickBooks and electronic payments and scheduling, like I am way below those competitors in a market. And now we're seeing the same thing with AI. Like, if you can't figure out how to either make your business more efficient because of AI or bring new value to your customers via AI, you're going to have competitors who will. And that's the general consensus.
and the competitors are going to probably be a bunch of teenagers, like three of them, developing the new billion-dollar business.
Yeah.
Um, Awesome.
I joke about it because, like, to your point, like, how do we train the next generation? You think about the big accounting firms like the Deloitte's, the EYs, right? Like, they
I don't
just
want to think about them, but go ahead.
but they have a stigma of churning through employees, but the reality is AI could make them even more valuable in those employees, because you think about accounting and it's like, why did we make a journal entry for this one transaction? And it's like, well, I don't know, we just, that's how we do it. Versus AI has the context of the entire ledger. And it's like, well, because we had this transaction and we needed a credit memo and now we need to do a journal entry. And it's just like, that is context that a client's usually not paying them to explain to their resources. And B, you're coming out of college, to your point, like, will a college degree program change? It needs to. We need to have more enablement and how to bring back troubleshooting. I feel like there's a big loss in the last
Interesting.
few decades of how do I troubleshoot? How do I figure out what's broken? How
Hmm.
do I
Hmm.
constructively build and pick apart a problem? So I think AI brings that to the forefront.
Interesting point. Interesting point. Yep. And the more YouTube ads I see, like, they relate to like very young folks about,
Hmm.
oh yeah, just click on this new thing and you can organize your entire group's, schedule and get things, and it'll tell you when you're behind and when you need to poke people. I'm like, yeah, that's one part of the problem. And then if you don't have the right data in there, what do you do? And it's like so cool. You're just going to try and sell them a turnkey system and people have no idea what's going on. But to one of your other points before, like that the business people, how they're going to codify through prompts, right? How they think and how they approach a problem. But that goes back to like I remember back in the last century when we used to get excited about like, well, code is data and data is code, and that's kind of where Lisp came from and things like Prolog. If you can have an interchange between that, start your project by understanding the data you're going to work with and then build your object oriented stuff around the data, and those were sound principles, and it still exists today. Like, if I'm going to build a to-do app, I'm going to first need to think about, well, what do I need to capture? The item, the date, is it completed? I need to understand the data before I start writing a program, and once I get the most of then I can start writing the create, read, update, and delete, the CRUD stuff around it. um, and it's definitely the same thing with prompting. It's like you're capturing this weird mindset, right? All these things that you don't think about as you get into the coding space over the years. You're just like, oh, I just knock it out and create a function, read this, read that. And now you got to step back and go, wait a minute. And it's going to slow you down initially. But I guess it's like learning how to be a touch typist. Initially, you want to hunt and peck with the two fingers. But once you can get fluid, and that's the same thing with this technology, and it's not going away. And to your point about M365, and I don't know why Google is having such a hard time. I do, but we won't go into that. But you take M3, Microsoft's right. You're going to bake that puppy right in, and there's going to be companies that are just going to snap that puppy up. I've been working in finance for the last my entire career, and watching these behemoths drag their feet and walk slow, and uh, they're having massive challenges, and they're not. I don't, are they going to get disrupted? I don't know, but the other hilarious thing I see is I know a lot of data science folks that I've worked with over the years. And of course, when I was started talking about AI, they're like, Doug, it's just machine learning. And I'm like, no, it's not. There's something different. And it's not like I was around with the AI winters. I remember RNNs and how to build those backward. I used to be a SAS programmer, and we used to do, all kinds of statistics. And it was the first set of steps, where it was one way that you could do steps towards neural networks. And I was like, this stuff's never gonna sell, and I'm not gonna spend my time in it. And so they're calling it ML. And then I started making fun of them. I'm like, that's like saying, rocket science is just calculus. No, it's not. There's a whole bunch of stuff in there. Um, so these data scientists they're trying to apply ML principles, which are fine, but they can't apply it to this new world of conversational AI. And they're hitting the wall and bouncing off it. And I keep saying, dude, you're going to go the way of the dodo. Why do I care about doing linear regressions and this, that, the other? I'm not going to be training these things. There's an entire world that just has to learn how to do prompting and how to get the data right and do all this kind of stuff. So I don't know.
There was a there was a clip going, or that I recently saw, of GitHub CEO, and they were mentioning that to get access to their CRM system, you had to do a pull request. And I think about that as like, that's the ideal state for automation. And then we've got the alternative, which is a service ticket in an ITSM platform like ServiceNow.
Boom.
And between the two, we can get further with something like a large language model, just because it makes the ideal automation state more accessible, like if it's just a question and answer form. And in the middle there's a ton of value.
Taking the unstructured data and letting the LM reason over it, if we can be anthropomorphize that word about this whole. But that's a great point. And if you join tomorrow, I'm not going to show it, but I'm starting to play with PRs from GitHub. Why can't I take a PR and generate a unit test that proves it fails, that my code fails, and then maybe start working on how to ask LLM continue and fix it, and then make a PR to check in. I may not be able to do that with what I have, with the mindset and whatnot, but this is where we're heading. And GitHub is Microsoft and these folks are going to provide it. I think Meta has had this behind the scenes a long time ago. I remember hearing story, right? So they used a different approach. They didn't use AI at that point, and they were achieving.
It was like 15. It was like 15 years ago probably. They were already working on like self-healing infrastructure.
Yep.
Like they've had it internally because they've solved these problems years ago.
I remember being at one of the QCon conferences, and one of the guys I think it was from Facebook, as they were formerly known, they were like, imagine walking into that company and you're like brand new, but you're a seasoned developer, but you don't know all the different techniques and this and the whys and the wheres. They had tools that you could actually sit there in your editor, and they had their own editor. And then they could ask like, hey, I need to do this, this, and this. And it would come back and say, okay, we have this, this, and this. Which one do you want to choose from? So they knew they needed to go in that direction because of the size they were. And now they have this thing called a large language model, which just smokes it. So I'm in.
Yeah. The other thing, I was talking with one of a Gartner analyst recently about this. I think your point to the fundamental constructs aren't going away. Like AI may be overhyped. There may be a little bit of a honeymoon period with it. But the fact of the matter is vector databases and how we've been able to apply that technology, and then things like data transformation jobs and how we're actually ingesting data and getting data to a good state in a usable location and then being able to identify what is valuable data to even put into that process. Those things aren't going away, and they're just becoming more valuable.
Absolutely. And I was just introduced to a new term. I'm used to ETL,
Hmm.
and now I guess it's probably been around and I haven't been paying attention. ELT, extract, load, and transform.
Hmm.
And they're showing how to use it with LLMs. And to your point about vector databases, so I ported the OpenAI SDK, the Python SDK, to PowerShell, and have been staying up on top of that. And they have a capability where you can um, you enable something called a file search, right? You upload a bunch of files, you enable the file search, which is all doable in the PowerShell module. Now you have a vector database over your data, and you can prompt. And I have something I call like PS chat docs. You can say dir star PDF, let's chat. It uploads all the docs, turns all those puppies on, and now you're in a chat mode with the documents you just uploaded. Without a doubt, that is the steps and the next set of steps. And to your point, how do you collect it? What's really good? Let the LLM make that decision. Put a human in the loop to make that decision. And we don't need to hire the juniors. And
Yeah,
we can get rid
Lindsay put a
uh,
comment in the chat there just about like the AI black box and the pros and cons there. And I mean, you probably remember supervised, unsupervised, semi-supervised. That's been a debate for years now, and it is true. Like the human in the loop concept, there has to be some validation, just in the same way that we audit our books if we're a publicly traded company. Like no one has ever said less controls or
mm,
um, less rigor in the outcome. It's more just this is something that is completely unregulated, right? It's brand
mhm.
new. So we're going to be years before we see what good practices would be in usage. So 100%, this is the time to be in that honeymoon phase and trial and error and yeah, figure out what it isn't good for.
One dude, you nailed it again. This is the cowboy time, right?
Mhm.
And this is why I like early adoption. This is like early monad. Like, well, what are we going to do with this? Are we going to continue to write C# snap-ins? And we'd go back to Microsoft and go, can you cut this crap out? And they're like, oh, wait till version 2. We're going to show you something cool. All right, excellent. Oh, that's really cool. I can do it all in PowerShell to write PowerShell. Awesome. And it's exactly the same thing once again. And maybe at some point, LLMs are going to show you how to audit the audit, right? So
Mhm.
how can it not get to that point, right? So how do you, and then without fine tuning and without training your own models and spending $1 billion on it, and we're watching all these companies spend billions and billions on it and the compute infrastructure, and we're watching Nvidia kick ass and hand out gumballs, right? They're taking this thing to the next level. So yeah, and the only way I know to do it is you got to jump in. And the sooner you jump in, the better. And stop getting on this thing and going, hey, I need a to-do list. No, 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 no. Start asking some wackadoo questions, right? Things that are on the top of your head, whatever.
Yeah.
Um,
Another
awesome.
use case I've loved to leverage AI with is I think I started doing this when Google first released their prompt book, their Notebook LM, which was like the
Figured you'd be
first.
into notebooks.
It was the first one where it let you upload data for free and use that as the source in a free model.
I
And
used it. It was fantastic. Yeah.
yeah, and now like there's other tools like that are accessible and do the same, but in the past we had like RSS feeds to consolidate a lot of different sources, and
Sweet.
now I get so many white papers, so many PDFs, so many documents or pages on like reference articles and blog posts. It's become a habit to me now to give that to an LLM and say, give me the 3 or 5 things I should care about from this. Like there's I get probably 5 or 10 documents a week that are 20 pages, and it's good information, but I'm not going to prioritize it over like a client meeting or internal conversations. But if I can just ask that one question, hey, what do I need to know about this? It makes it more accessible, and then I'm more likely to say, oh, okay, I actually should read this about this point specifically.
Exactly. Exactly. And depending on how you're working with that, you can actually further ask questions. Now, imagine if you could do that with an agent that would actually ask the questions that you codified in prompts that could
Yep.
do it automatically for you. Um, I have a tool which I didn't show, and I'm not going to show today, but I have shown on the live streams that are premium. I have a YouTube assistant, and I think Pete Cook was on the line. He might still be here. There he is. Um, and he came back to me. He goes, we don't have something like a YouTube's transcript scraper. I'm like, yeah, I've been wanting one. I looked at it, and I couldn't figure it out, and it was too deep. I didn't care. And then he went off and he just wrangled that puppy, and he put up a PSYT. So guess what I did? Just like I took Tavily, I took his and I wrapped it in a tool. So now I have something called Invoke YouTube Assistant. I give it an ID to a YouTube, pulls down the transcript. Now I have a conversation with it. Give me the top 5 bullets. Summarize the interesting pieces. Did it really say this, this, and this? So now I have an autonomous assistant that I can say, look at these 5 videos. Tell me what's common, what's not, and give me a nice summary so I can then fit. And which ones you think I should go check out?
Yeah,
This is the future.
It's funny too, like how uncomfortable some people get with this concept, because I've used a correlation in the past of, we've been doing this with contact centers for years. You call into one number and you have to give more context to get to the right team to answer your question. And yeah, not going to argue that experience is horrible in some implementations, but in some implementations it's phenomenal. And like, that is a commonplace thing, and this is just the next iteration of that, really.
Dude, this is why I was so glad you agreed to come on. So I'm looking at some new pieces that just came out of AI, and Andrew Ng, you probably know the name from Deep Learning. He talked about a number of months ago, back last year. I couldn't believe it. I was like, how did I miss this video? But he was talking about how AutoGen, they had a concept where you have a command, you have the 3 agents, a commander, a code writer, and a code checker. So now you have these 3 agents working in tangent, and you tell the commander, I want to do blah, blah, blah. It knows to pass the information to the writer. The writer's supposed to write this, that, the other, make correct code, make unit tests, and then it's got to pass that off to the code checker, right? So that's your QA. It goes through and makes sure things are correct. If not, it feeds back what's wrong and what needs to be improved. And after a bunch of rounds, which you just put a loop, like do it 3 times, come back to the commander and show me the code. That in and of itself, which is very simple to write, and now it's even easier with my agent technology, but that simple thing to write, you can use on a 3.5 model and go from a 60% accuracy to over 85%. And then when you start applying that to the 4.0 and the next levels, you're just getting 100% by having that happen. So back to your point, calling into a center, there's new pieces are coming out where you do triage on you give an agent, you triage the issue, and then you figure out from the tools you have which one to call and whatnot. So it's working, and it's working. And yeah, you're going to have issues, but now that's where you get you know that, okay, I'm going to find the issues, but let me generally look at what's going on. And this thing can do amazing stuff. And then there's even more discussions we can go down on triaging and agents and triples and whatnot. But that's the mindset that what you're talking about is the mindset you have to bring and say, oh, how does LLMs now take that and enhance it, amplify it, or replace it? Yeah. Disruption.
And even circling back to Lindsay's comment too, is it adds a level of abstraction, and we need people who understand how agents fit together. We need people who can, that's not going to work every time, but the majority of the time it will. But when it breaks, we still need people who understand it and can fix it. So people aren't going away. It's just a shift in perspective of where they spend their time.
That's why I have the -show tool calls. That's part of the debug process. But if you don't know that that's having a problem, how do you now go deeper into, which I'll cover tomorrow. But as you make the point, people need to understand the agents. That's why I'm going to change my title from AI tinkerer to AI engineer. That's where the next level is that we need to go. But you're not going to learn how to do this if you're going to sit back and go, it hallucinates. It's too expensive. I'm not spending $20. Even for 3 months, I'm not going to spend that kind of money. I'm not going to learn all this. And the weird part is, take 4.0 mini, for example, and the latest version, they just dropped 4.0, which is as accurate as the original 4.0. They just dropped the price 50%. Mini is like less than pennies, half fractions of pennies on a dollar. It's getting to the point where intelligence can't even be metered anymore. So if you have I can't afford it, there's too much hallucination, is this, that, these are just excuses that are going to dig you a deep hole. So, but I don't want to get on my soapbox. I'll get off it now.
Uh, One last thought there too is if you've ever managed people, I always think of a GPT sort of like a employee. Like you can't expect it to do exactly what you would do. You can't expect it to be perfect. You should plan to have further conversations and follow up on it. And then you'll start to see results.
That dude, that exactly correct. The this we don't want to call it a person, but it actually is. How would you handle an intern that came in, and if that intern starts to show promise, which is LMs do out of the box, how would you work with it so that it becomes a solid player for you, right? And that's going to be the prompting, the data you give it. Give it all your strategy data. Give it all your HR data. Fix that data. But your problem shifts. You're no longer really programming, right? You're doing data science, scrubbing data, whatnot. But the results that at the other end, and the fact that you can pass this off as a chatbot or an agent to somebody is just tremendous. And people's jobs are going to shift, absolutely, and it's going to lay waste to a lot of other jobs. And if AI is not going to replace you, but someone who knows how to use it will. So thanks for coming. I really appreciate you taking the time. This has been a great conversation. I hope folks, if you have any questions, we can take the last one or two. Hope people got stuff out of this. I know I did. Like to have some
Always
more
enjoyable.
conversations with you. Oh, it's awesome. And maybe you'll take a look at the PS agent stuff in the PowerShell space. I think you'll be, I would love to get you, I know telling you things like that plants the seeds, and feedback would be fantastic.
Yeah, we've been building a lot of, especially like with the Fargate and the Azure Container App Jobs and being able to have microservices that instantly available. We've been starting to tinker with how do we add that as our agent platform. So a container image is a dedicated agent, and we can inject different pre-prompts and stuff into that. So
Brilliant. That that is definitely, and just think you don't have to worry about Docker anymore because it'll build a Docker file for you. So I got a question. Why or what do you advise as a research project proposal? So Murat, are you asking like, okay, what do you like? Start doing this? I'll kick it over to you, Mike. What do you? So I get more time to think.
yeah, I'd probably say if you've got an idea for a module, or even if you don't, if you even can construct a sentence or two that describes a problem, that is always a good starting point. And I would say, if it's more like school, like give it the context of what you're trying to do. Is this for a class? What class? What's the background of the professor? Right? Like you can give that model context and ask that exact question. Like if I need to do a research project proposal, I'm probably going to start with that
There
question.
you
That
go.
is
There
my
you go.
problem.
That Mike hit the nail on the head with that. Put your question right into ChatGPT right now. Real time financing, absolutely. Put that into chat. Go into ChatGPT and say, "Listen, I don't know what I'm doing. I want to talk about real time financing forecasting," and then it'll start to talk to you. It'll go, "Oh, great. What do you want to talk about?" And then you go, you can ask it, "Well, suggest some things for me. I'm new to this, or I have this kind of a background," and you'd be amazed at how this thing starts to hone itself to you. And to Mike's point early on, and I know we're going to jump off here, is that you talked about going to AI and making it part of your workflow. Um, AI first mindset. That's really, really important. Put a post-it on your desk, on your terminal. Ask AI. I sit and I see things on the X platform. I see people asking questions, and I sit and go, just copy that into Chat GPT and see what it says, and get your feet wet.
Yeah, a perfect example of that too, in the finance space. Like there was a point in time where I was doing quantitative financing or finance investing, and at the time LLMs didn't exist. I had to figure out what is a MACD, what is a moving average, what is a derivative over time. I had to understand A, the math behind that, then B, how to apply that, then C, how to actually write that and implement that into a function. And there were so many things that I had to figure out before I could even start, versus now, like if I don't know where to start, it's an LLM. Because if I don't know where to start, if I don't have that knowledge, that's my first question is, what book should I read? what blog post should I read? Who on social media is
Mm,
talking about this? Like,
mm,
that is real-time finance forecasting. There's tremendous resources out there, from like the Morgan Stanleys, um, all the way through the quant firms like Virtu. Like,
exactly.
the content's out there, and it's been out there for years, but if you don't know where to start, it's hard.
It- and that you go and it just let's take the real quick the Fibonacci series, right?
Mhm.
Imagine trying to write that as, people, I use that as an example and people go, oh, everybody knows that. No, they don't. But you can go up to an LLM and say, hey, I need to implement the Fibonacci series. It'll come back first and maybe show you how to do it in Python. But then you can say, pick your language. Show me in PHP. Show me in PowerShell. Show me in C Sharp. Go, Rust. Show me in all of them, right?
Mhm.
And then so that's part of like what we're taught, Mike and I are talking about, planting seeds for your imagination that, you know, don't ask us, ask the LLM. AI first mindset.
Yeah, there are so many answers that I could give to that topic that I feel unqualified to even start giving you, where I'd rather have an AI model coach us both into what should we have a conversation about.
There you go. Absolutely. And we didn't even use AI much. Showed a little bit of example, did a little chat GPT, found out I do all of Adam's work, which I appreciate. um, so let's end it there. Again, thanks for coming on. Hope folks enjoyed. You're welcome. And once this is ready, I'll put it up on YouTube. So if you want to head over to the YouTube channel that's in the chat and subscribe, and you'll know when I post it. If you want to see it again, get some information. Thanks again, Mike. Talk to you soon. All right,
Take
folks.
care.
Talk to you later. Take it easy.